There we go.
Okay. So let's just start off from the very first class. What did you learn from the first class? So that was both the wet lab and the field day out at Julie Holly's house.
So we learned how to do USDA tactile soil tests.
So you learn how to classify soils using your hands with a classification chart. So you learn something about soils, right? What else did you learn that day? How to do an infiltration test. So all of a sudden you're learning about soils and how soils are able to absorb, different kinds of soils are able to allow water to infiltrate into the soils so that you know whether or not your BMP will be functional in that particular location at the infiltration site, test site. Question. If you don't get adequate, what was the threshold that Chris talked about that was the typical threshold for being able to put a BMP? Do you remember something inches per hour? 0.5. 0.5 inches per hour. Anything less than that, that indicates that you have a soil that does not have good infiltration. Bingo! That was the next question. Thank you, Alex. 2 pennies for her. Throw her a donut. If she catches it in her mouth, then she gets 10 pennies, okay? But that's exactly the point. It's not a loss if you have a low infiltration rate in the soil, because you can always add an underdrain underneath your BMP, whether it's a pervious paving, rain garden, infiltration planter, etc. Okay, so does everybody understand that? So now we're there. What else did you learn about being out at Julie Holly's site? There's this thing where water flows downhill, okay? Slope. Water flows downhill both on a roof surface and on slopes. And last week, you focused on creating flow areas on a base plan so that you can visually see where the water flows on your site. Okay. Did anybody not understand how important it is to kind of put those little arrows in so that you can visually see where water flows on your site? It's really critical in the sense of, particularly for those of us that are designers, because if you have flow areas coming down and you think you're going to put your BMP over here, but none of the flow arrows are pointing in that direction, that's not a good indication, all right? We also learned about doing roof line stormwater runoff. You don't have to consider slope, but you have to know where all your downspouts are, because it's exactly where all the water is being concentrated from a particular square area of the roof. So last week, we focused a lot on generating runoff volume for the roofs, okay? What else did we do last week that was like, everybody was a little bit like, oh my goodness, this doesn't make sense. But in the end, it made sense. What was the other piece besides runoff, roof runoff? Right, so we had runoff coefficients, which Chris is using the language today, C factor. So runoff coefficient and C factor is the exact same thing. All right. The other thing is that we figured out how to determine drainage areas in 3 different scales. Can somebody talk about what the 3 levels of scales were that we figured out drainage areas? Drainage areas are really important in order to figure out runoff volume. Okay. So what was the thing that we started off in the morning last week? Did we start with roof, or did we start off with? Okay, roof. Yeah, roof was like the simple example. So everybody could kind of see how the water ran off on the roof and it went to the various drain, downspouts, etc. Okay? So roof runoff was one area, so that's very kind of micro, that's very in. And then what was the next layer out that we spent a large part of the afternoon on?
For the surface areas
the surface areas and the drainage areas in the actual landscape. So what was happening on your property and delineating drainage areas for the property, okay? And then the other thing that we focused on was more like looking at the entire area outside of just your property and seeing what water was coming into your property from abutting properties. This might be stating the obvious, but somebody tell me why that's important. Water's coming on site, so if you don't account it for it, you're going to be in big trouble after you put in all these fabulous BMPs and you only counted for the roof water and little water coming from one little drainage area in your yard, and you have a half an acre running onto that corner of the property you put in a rain garden, it will blow out the first storm. So you need to know what you're dealing with, okay? So the purpose of this course is to kind of incrementally learn more and more pieces that build into the next place of how we get to BMP, to how do we design to BMPs, right? So today, you all watched, in preparation for today, you watched videos that talk about the various LIDs, low impact development, BMPs, and today you have started the first part of the homework. Also, we talked about how trees are going to affect your design for BMPs in terms of critical root zones. And we talked about figuring out drainage areas again, looking at drainage areas right here for this homework, okay? But now you're actually starting to go, so again, let me just reiterate, each class builds on the next one, which builds on the next one, all right? As you, now you're going to apply all that information into this homework here, so you're going to have the opportunity to, you just did the pervious paving area, now you're going to do the other portions of the assignment as your homework, okay, which means delineating out drainage areas, calculating runoff volume, figuring out what runoff volume is and how many cubic feet is there, and then what size does your BMP need to be. Am I stating that pretty correctly? Okay. Do we cover anything else that I forgot to mention that you can think of that was really pertinent? Okay. So for the rest of today, we're going to have Chris is going to talk briefly about how to develop a base plan. So most of all, what you guys have been working off a plan that we've provided for you. All right. For landscape designers, you already know what the process is to develop a base plan or existing conditions or something like that. So he's just going to kind of go over very briefly what it is, how you generate your own base plan, and so that will be helpful to you in your process of doing this. So it's a little bit of review for landscape designers. It may be new for the planners or allied professionals. Then from there, I'm going to go into a very introductory, loose conversation of what I call bubble diagramming for BMPs, okay? And I'm going to do a little brief introduction to that, and we're going to have, after that I'm going to show a very quick, like, PowerPoint of various types of BMPs if you want. It's mostly just a dog and pony show that I bring out, okay? So I'm happy to do it now, or I can post it on Blackboard, whatever your preference is.
Yeah. I thought we were supposed to bring our topo map.
So the point, yes. So you're bringing your topo map. So for we'll at the latter part, like the last hour, whoever has a topo map, we're going to go around and help you figure out how to do that.
Okay.
The drainage areas for topo maps. Yeah. So some people have already done that.
Yeah.
Some people just need to throw it in front of Chris's eyes and say, yes, that looks great. Yeah, so have it approved, have it looked at. So that will be between 5 and 6. So you're welcome to stay here to make sure that you've had your from between 5 and 6, have your topo map looked at, okay, for your project site. Also, you can do your homework, start doing your homework, and we can also be here to be available to help you with that. So that's what we're doing between now and 6. All right. Okay. So you want to talk about base plans?
Sure.
Yeah.